So, just recently, the highly acclaimed Star Wars television series Andor just ended its second season. This second season was highly anticipated by fans since the original season actually aired all the way back in 2022 on Disney+. It seems this second season was worth the wait, however, since it's been highly acclaimed and the show overall has been praised for how it takes a more grounded, realistic look at the universe of Star Wars. And specifically, it shows how the influence of the Empire impacts such a large variety of people all across the galaxy. But unfortunately, a certain notorious subset of reviewers on YouTube weren't so happy about this second season. I'm talking about none other than anti-woke television critics who are very not happy with Andor, believe it or not. Oh boy. Anti-woke television critics are a pretty infamous group of critics on YouTube and other platforms that tend to get mad at different TV shows if they have a woman or a person of color or some sort of minority featured in them. Instead of looking at the things you should criticize a TV show for, such as its pacing, how it handles its characters, how it manages to spread its story across several sets of episodes, and things like that, they'd rather get mad that the latest Star Wars show just so happens to have a Hispanic man in the lead. Yes, this is a real complaint they have, oh boy. Or they'll get mad that Lazarus, the latest anime from the creator of Cowboy Bebop, has a joke moment where a boy dresses up as a girl to infiltrate a secret club. Oh no, the horror! Ultimately, most of their criticisms are incredibly superficial and not really criticisms at all. So today, let's look at some of these anti-woke television criticisms, talk about why they're not real criticisms, and talk about what television criticism should look like overall. To start, let's look at the aforementioned Andor Season 2, which very quickly became one of the most talked about series in current television. A lot of praise was directed at this show overall since it takes a more adult, grounded look at the Empire and its influence as a fascist government that rules over the citizens of the galaxy. However, one scene in particular in the third episode of the show is what caught a lot of people's attention. Specifically, in the third episode, Imperial forces come to the planet that Bix and the others are on to try and audit workers' papers and see if there are any illegal immigrants on the planet. However, it's during this scene that one of the Imperial officers actually tries to take this opportunity to rape Bix. And funny enough, of all the things, this is one of the scenes that the anti-woke grifters got mad at and called woke propaganda. I know, I'm just as mind-boggled as you are. Two anti-woke channels in particular got very mad at this scene, specifically Star Wars Theory and also Nerdrotic. Let's take a look at what Star Wars Theory had to say first.
There was a scene in Andor, if you aren't up to date, where there was a lot of grape. You guys know what that means? Essentially, there was a scene at the end of the third episode where one of the females was S.A.'d, was graped, essentially. She got away, finally, great. But look, I didn't feel like that really belonged in Star Wars.
I find it funny that he can't even bother to remember that the female character's name is Bix. Really makes you wonder how much he was actually paying attention to this show, huh? But I also find it kind of weird how he's basically blowing off the sexual assault scene as no big deal whatsoever. Oh, there was a rape scene and she got away. Good for her, great. Oh, it's no big deal. Happens all the time. Like, maybe at least approach this with a little more tact or respect given what you're talking about here.
It was just off-putting. I feel like what George did was that he had implied scenes. So like Anakin with the kids, with the lightsabers, and then it cuts. You know what's going to happen. And there was actually supposed to be a scene where you show all of the kids chopped up on the floor, but they decided against it. And I've covered that as well in videos. Also, even Nick Gillard told me that there was a scene where, the hologram scene, that was an actual scene that they ended up taking and turning it into a hologram because it was too dark. That was a full-on scene, right? Where Anakin was choking out one person, like killing another, and then beheading, and then fighting Sindralig. That was all filmed.
So already, Star Wars Theory does admit that Star Wars has tackled darker things before, and even in some cases, they've straight up filmed things like mutilation. And even like he stated here, in a movie like Revenge of the Sith, Anakin is shown getting ready to mutilate hundreds of Jedi younglings. And he's also later shown choking his own wife to death. And heck, he's even tortured his own daughter with a torture droid before.
There's implied scenes, and you're going too far with Star Wars. Leia with Jabba. You don't see him taking her from the back or his passing her around or anything like that. Maybe it's in the books it's explained, or the comics is totally different.
I find it funny he tries to bring up Jabba as an example and claims that Jabba never did anything sexual to Leia when he's literally the one who dresses her up in his skimpy outfit. This is after he captures her, and this is just for his own pleasure. And literally in the scene before, there's a Twi'lek girl that's his slave dancer that he tries to make advances on, and when she rejects him, he throws her into the Rancor pit for her to die. I guess you forgot about all that though, huh, Star Wars Theory?
The argument a lot of people are making is that it's a real show, it's for adults, and I'm like, do you need to see that for it to be a real show? You need to see that for it to be an adult show? Listen, we all have experiences with, unfortunately, SA. I don't want to see it in my Star Wars. Look, Sopranos is my favorite show in the entire world. There's a very real scene with that in there. It fits the show. It fits that world. It fits that real world on Earth. This never been done in Star Wars, doesn't need to be there. There's a lot of people that have a problem with it. I have a problem with it. I don't need to see that.
But the thing is, that scene also fits Andor just as much as it fits The Sopranos. As stated before, Andor is a much more realistic, hardened look at what the Empire does when it's in control of an entire galaxy. It's a really introspective look at what life under a fascist regime looks like. And the truth is, in a fascist regime, stuff like this would probably go unchecked and happen a lot, especially by those in power and in command in a scenario like this. So really, no matter what Star Wars Theory tries to say here, it actually does fit the world of Andor really well. And also just the overall tone and message that this show is going for.
I don't think it makes it some nuanced show. It's very, like, what? We don't need to see that. You can imply it if you so wish. You want to go there, cut away, like George did. And I feel like we need to follow his beat to how he would film and edit.
I find it real funny that he tries to imply that George wouldn't touch something like this, when in actuality, the original Star Wars movies were all about fascism too. When creating Star Wars, George Lucas was actually very inspired by his worldview on the Vietnam War at the time. For him, in a lot of ways, the original Star Wars trilogy was actually a vessel for him to create an allegory for the Vietnam War. His intention was to liken the rebels to the Vietnamese and liken the Empire to the invading US Army. This is something he specifically has come out and said before.
You did something very interesting with Star Wars, if you think about it. The good guys are the rebels. They're using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. I think we call those guys terrorists today. We call them Mujahideen, we call them Al-Qaeda.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
Exactly. So were you thinking of that at the time?
In the case of Star Wars, it actually has always been influenced by politics, so Star Wars Theory just is incorrect here.
I said Vader wouldn't tolerate that shit, nor does the Empire condone it. Listen, I'm getting a lecture from people who just found Star Wars last week because of Disney, telling me what Vader would and wouldn't do.
Not really, because like I said before, Vader doesn't really care what happens to individual people in his empire. That's kind of the whole point. As stated before, he massacred countless Jedi younglings, choked his own wife, and tortured his own daughter. Do you really think this is the guy that's gonna care if sexual assault is happening in his empire? I really don't think so. But like I said before, Star Wars Theory isn't the only anti-woke grifter that's gotten in on talking about this scene from Andor. None other than Nerdrotic also made a video about this, so let's see what he had to say.
There was an attempted rape scene in Star Wars.
He turns around to face Bix with a sympathetic look.
My shoulders get sore. You must have strong hands.
Honestly, I think that scene is much ado about nothing, considering the controversy is overshadowing stuff that is far worse, including the heavy-handed immigration allegory, because we haven't seen that genre in the last 6 days, Mon Mothma dancing to 90s techno music, or Andor escaping the squabbling rebels who imprisoned him while they were distracted playing a game of rock, paper, scissors.
I find it funny that he tries to act like immigration allegories and real-world political events overall being integrated into Star Wars is a totally new thing, clearly, that only happened in the last 6 days. When, in actuality, as stated before, that's always been a part of Star Wars. This franchise really always has had a political influence, even from the very beginning.
And let's face it, that scene from Andor pales in comparison to this.
The Sith reaches the edge of the placid pool. He unslings his bag from his shoulder and unpacks it, while Osha observes from a hiding spot in the rocks. As he begins to untie a belted knot from around his waist, she straightens up for a better look. He begins to undress, revealing a prominent scar on his well-toned back. Dropping his billowy-legged hakama pants, he steps forward with the sunlight accentuating his taut muscles. He wades barefoot into the pool. Keeping her predatory gaze on him, she lies in wait behind some rocks closer to the water's edge.
There's a lot of eye going on there. And yes, I was talking about the viewers as well.
So I don't even like the Acolyte, like I've talked about before here, for its many storytelling flaws, but that's really not what is going on in that scene at all in the show. In that clip that Nerdrotic shows, Osha is actually trying to kill the Sith in that scene, hence why it describes her as having a predatory stare. So no, she was not trying to eye rape him at all, as Nerdrotic claims, which is just a really dumb term, by the way.
Now, the media certainly wants to make something out of that scene, and quite frankly, so do some of the creatives from Andor, including showrunner Tony Gilroy. From The Hollywood Reporter, Andor creator explains that shocking assault scene. We're all the products of...
What did you say?
Tony Gilroy on why that sexual assault attempt against an undocumented fugitive, thought I was kidding about the immigration thing, in the show's season 2 premiere block was necessary to tell an accurate tale of revolution, even within the Star Wars universe.
I mean, yeah, he's not really wrong. In many different periods of revolution throughout history, this kind of thing has happened before. A great example is the historically accurate tale of Pocahontas, since when white settlers first came to America, she actually suffered rape at their hands after being kidnapped by them. These are things that happen in history that you can't really shy away from or say they didn't happen, because they did. So in a lot of ways, a show like Andor is actually realistically showing what would happen during a revolution.
Whatever side you come down on this little kerfuffle online, you can't blame Star Wars fans for rolling their eyes and being exasperated considering the herstory of Disney Star Wars.
The thing is, though, you kinda can, cause again, I know I keep saying it, but politics have always been a part of Star Wars. They aren't something that just magically appeared because Disney bought the brand. That element has always been central to the story of Star Wars. But interestingly enough, Andor isn't the only television series they've gotten mad at recently. They've also recently taken shots at Avatar: The Last Airbender, the popular Nickelodeon cartoon, which is currently undergoing a series of revivals. One such revival is actually a movie called The Legend of Aang: The Last Airbender, which is set to come out in theaters in 2026 and serve as a sequel to the original series. Personally, I'm actually really excited for this film, given its A, 2D animation on the big screen, which we almost never get anymore, and also I'm curious to see what they do with Team Avatar after the events of the original series. But you know who's not excited for this film? None other than Rev Says Desu, who made a whole video saying that this movie is woke. Apparently he's very upset that this film is not bringing back the cast of the original cartoon, so let's see what he had to say on that.
But if you scroll down here, you also notice she has some upcoming projects like The Legend of Aang, The Last Airbender, and that is something that is mired in some controversy because that is supposed to be a part of 3 films that are basically continuing on where the series left off, and I think it's focusing more on their adulthood adventures, and there's something odd about it. The entire original cast is gone in terms of the voice actors, and that's a mistake and makes people kind of scratch their heads because they had very iconic performances that a lot of people really cherish when they look back at them.
So the thing about that is that this film is actually supposed to feature Team Avatar in their early to mid-20s, and Aang is actually supposed to be 25 in this film. So I really don't think it would make sense to cast the same voice actor that did the kid version of Aang in the original show for this movie. It's supposed to be an older take on the character, so I honestly think it makes more sense to cast a voice actor who's gonna be able to do an older version of Aang for this movie.
This casting director would respond, saying this: I told Mike and Brian that I understood how important it was to get this right for them and for the fans because I'm a fan too, also my favorite IP. Since the original show was released, there's been more emphasis in voiceover to match actors' ethnic/racial background to the characters they're portraying. ATLA is a fictional world, but there are cultural influences for each nation/kingdom, and we wanted to explore the talent from those groups. It's about providing a good voice for a character, and all of this nonsense about having to understand the background of these characters in order to give a proper performance is totally ridiculous. It's one of those things, it's meant to be so progressive, and yet it is so regressive, and all it does is segregate people based on the color of their skin and limit their opportunities based on the color of their skin. It's ridiculous, and it's something we have talked about before with Pro ZD. You might recognize him from his popular YouTube channel. He's also a voice actor, and pretty much from the jump in his voice acting career, as we talked about in previous videos, was trying to propagate this idea of authentic casting. And that's what we're talking about with this current situation, where he is espouting this belief that you have to match the ethnicity of the character you are playing, which is so unbelievably ridiculous.
Okay, I just find this really funny here. Rev says Desu tries to claim that ProZD is in favor of segregated voice acting, and that he thinks when it comes to voice acting race-based characters, only voice actors with that character's ethnicity should be playing that character. But the thing is, even if you just take a cursory glance at the article that Rev is showing here, it literally says voice actor Sungwon ProZD Cho criticizes race-based casting. You don't even have to barely look to see that ProZD isn't in favor of this at all. And his career as a voice actor kinda shows this too. He's played plenty of characters who don't just reflect his ethnicity, like Sunder from Boyfriend Dungeon or Radiskor from God of War Ragnarok, a little Nordic squirrel. If anything, ProZD has actually been a huge proponent of being able to have a versatile repertoire of voices you can do. So really, everything Rev has said here is just straight up misinformation. ProZD doesn't really think this at all, nor is he saying that at all here.
Think about it in a logical way here. With someone like ProZD, who's in the anime industry, like, imagine the anime dub industry if this was actually practiced. Pretty much everyone would be out of a job. Unless you were a Japanese-born English voice actor, you wouldn't be able to play pretty much any of the roles. Imagine if you were a black voice actor in the anime industry. All of your opportunities would just evaporate. Maybe 1 out of every 1,000 characters would be something you could have a chance at voice acting. The ones you'd be allowed to voice act, you know, by people like ProZD.
No, I think this is just him criticizing race-based casting and voice acting like he was talking about in that article that you lied about already. Rev seems so intent on trying to make ProZD look like someone who's in favor of race-based casting when really all the evidence points in the opposite direction of that. All it really takes is a simple Google search or looking through his Twitter feed to show that he really doesn't think that at all. If someone doesn't actually bother to fact-check something like this though, they might actually end up believing what Rev says here, as ridiculous as it is. Generally though, that's the goal of most grifters on YouTube and other channels. They'll usually try to imbue their own beliefs onto their audience in the form of a negative criticism or review of something. And generally their hope is that you won't fact check them at all so they can actually convince you of these kinds of things. But this is just blatantly spreading misinformation. There's no real criticism going on here whatsoever. To give another solid example of this, let's look at another show that the anti-woke grifters often get mad at, that being Marvel's Loki. Loki seasons 1 and 2 were actually a bright spot for Marvel fans amongst a plethora of rather mediocre movies and projects otherwise. But this show also did happen to feature a female version of Loki, and we know how the anti-woke grifters feel about that for sure. Let's take a look at the Critical Drinker's review of the show and see exactly just what he had to say about it.
Anyway, with those out of the way, we come at last to Loki, Marvel's third attempt to ruin a popular established character by making them do and say things that their cinematic counterparts never would.
Not really. Loki in this show does act the exact same way that he does in the movies, in all honesty. He's still incredibly arrogant and cocky, just like how he is in the films. It just so happens that he's in an environment where he can't really use the full extent of his powers. This, of course, doesn't stop him from still being arrogant and talking back to everyone around him, though. So, really, this still is the Loki from the main Marvel films. He just so happens to be in a position where he's completely powerless with all the people around him, so it ends up being more of an introspective deconstruction of his character more than anything. And for what it's worth, it's actually handled pretty well. This is one of the better Marvel shows that they've put out.
The point is that Loki's escape with the Tesseract altered the timeline and marked him out as a variance. Wait, shouldn't Tony Stark be erased since he's the one who invented the time machine? Now, Loki's all set to be erased from history when Owen Wilson comes in with an offer he can't refuse. Help them to hunt down a particularly tricky variant they've been struggling to apprehend, and maybe they'll spare his life. I wonder why they want him in particular for a job like this.
What is this about? This isn't about you.
No way! Oh wow, who could have predicted that this masked figure would turn out to be another variant of Loki? Naturally, because this Loki's a female, she's better than our version in every possible way. She's smarter, more cunning, more physically capable, better at fighting.
That's not what the show tries to portray at all, actually. They literally have a scene where Loki and Sylvie are fighting side by side and equally taking down all the goons around them. In no way does this series ever try to show that Sylvie is a better fighter or more cunning than Loki. She's a parallel version of Loki himself, so it kinda makes sense they would be on even ground.
And of course, she has a tragic backstory to totally justify her actions in the present.
No, her backstory actually mirrors Loki's exactly. Loki is also given a tragic backstory, but it's not meant to justify his actions in the present. He is still a villain, and his actions are still seen as villainous. While there are obviously sympathetic aspects of Loki, such as the fact he's not even Asgardian, but he's actually a frost giant, and he's felt like an outcast pretty much his whole life and felt judged because of that, it obviously still does not excuse his actions whatsoever, and it's the same thing with Sylvie. I don't think they're really trying to justify the actions of either version of Loki, just trying to show how they got to the point they're at now.
Honestly, just when I think the MCU can't get any dumber or more disrespectful to its own legacy, along comes something like Loki to totally subvert my expectations. This show is an insult. Not just to Marvel or its characters, but to basic storytelling, common sense, and human intelligence. It's a perfect example of what happens when hubris, agenda, and greed take priority over storytelling. A show made by people who either don't understand or openly hate the very property they've inherited, or simply don't care about anything except using them as a platform for the message. Loki himself now talks and acts like a completely different person, falling for obvious deceptions that he never would have before, making dumb decisions that are totally inappropriate to the situation, or failing to come up with any logical plans, contingencies, or counters to anything that's happening.
The thing is, this is still 100% the character of Loki in this show. There is nothing inaccurate about him here. If anything, this show is actually able to dive deeper into his psychology and what makes him do the things he does. It shows how he's incredibly attention-seeking and ultimately just wants recognition for the work he does overall as the god of mischief. And it also dives into his deeper need to feel like he's important and like he belongs to something and like he has a glorious purpose. If anything, that's basically the show's tagline too. And I think in a lot of ways, it's stuff like this that easily make this the best Marvel TV show. Films and television shows are such vastly different mediums, even though they might appear similar on the surface, and there's really a different way you have to approach either of them. With a film, you generally have about 2 hours on average to tell the kind of story you want to tell and showcase the kind of characterization you want to showcase. With a TV show, you obviously get more time and more of an episodic structure to really flesh a character out, which is exactly what Loki does. It allows us to really dive deep into Loki's character and get a much more introspective look at him specifically than we've been able to get in the movies. But unfortunately, Drinker can't really seem to see that and instead wants to focus on the fact that there's a female version of Loki in this show, and that's clearly woke propaganda. You can't just look at a TV show, see a female character, and call it woke. That's not real criticism. If you really want to properly critique a TV show, you have to look at the fundamental things that make a show to begin with. Things like character development, pacing, cinematography, how the show is able to spread its story over a set amount of episodes. Things like that are what you should really critique when looking at a TV show, not things like this. But of course, Loki isn't the only Marvel TV show that the anti-woke grifters have gone after, not by a long shot. They've also gone after She-Hulk, Daredevil even, and more recently, they've gone after Ironheart, the most recent Disney Plus Marvel show. Now, for me personally, I think there are a lot of very valid criticisms you can throw at a show like Ironheart. Probably one of the biggest ones is that I don't think most people even remember Riri Williams' character from Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Like, she showed up for a brief moment there, and then it seemed like she was kinda just forgotten about until this show came out. They didn't really try to build her character up at all or make people excited or anticipate this show whatsoever. But of course, that's not the thing these guys are mad about. They're just mad that a black female character is taking center stage in a Marvel show. Let's take a look at a review for the show from one of the anti-woke grifters, that being HeelVsBabyFace. You know, the 50-year-old man who threw a temper tantrum for about 2 minutes because he didn't like that there were pronouns in Starfield? Yeah, that guy. I bet he has a lot of very insightful commentary for this show, so let's take a look.
So it starts off with a soliloquy from Riri, which in my world means something I think completely different to what they think it means. And she talks about how she believes she can be the greatest inventor of her generation. Probably not that difficult, let's be honest. But something's holding her back. She's had all the help from Wakanda. She's had the Stark internship or whatever.
So the thing is, Riri actually never had a Stark internship, even though Heel tries to claim that here. In the show, she mentions having an internship abroad, which is actually just referring to what she did in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. There's nothing at all about her in the MCU interning at Stark Industries, so I'm not really sure what Heel was talking about here.
But she doesn't have the cash dollar money, because the only reason that Tony Stark got to where he was because he was a billionaire. Yeah, I don't think the person that made this watched Iron Man.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps!
And I don't think you paid attention to that scene at all, Heel, because that's actually not what happens here. In this scene, Riri is discussing how she needs funds to pull off the ideas and inventions that she wants. She mentions that because Tony Stark was a billionaire who inherited his fortune from his father, he was able to make the inventions that he wanted to. She's not trying to say at all that Tony Stark doesn't do work just because he's a billionaire. He still made all his own inventions. And him being a billionaire just happened to aid him with that, so she wants money to be able to do the same thing. That's really all there is here, and it's pretty easy to see, but it looks like Heel missed that. Or probably the more likely answer, he knew this was the case, but he wanted to try and mislead his audience. I also find it funny that literally every single anti-woke grifter that has talked about this show always uses that clip of Obadiah Stane from the first Iron Man movie. It's like these guys always play a giant game of telephone whenever making these videos and figure out what clips they do and don't want to use when making these videos, since they want to figure out what will help them best project this message to their audience.
She does what all good heroes do, immediately turns to crime. I'm kind of confused, because if we're the people that always get called racist, etc., why do all the black writers and showrunners immediately turn their black characters into thieves?
Really? So are you gonna sit there and tell me that Black Panther is a thief? A black character that was written by a black writer, Ryan Coogler? Or are you gonna tell me that Adonis from Creed is a thief? Or are you gonna tell me that Sammy from the movie Sinners, which just came out this year, is a thief? Yeah, I didn't think so. Clearly not all black characters written by black writers are written to be criminals. That just doesn't make any sense.
The AI then coincidentally just happens to pack in. Riri then tragically, falls to the ground and dies, splattered to death on the boulevards of Chicago after hitting that concrete at what I can only imagine was over 100 miles an hour. Oh no, she's absolutely fine, because it doesn't matter if you're Thor or Captain America, where you can actually take a hit like this. If you're a 4'11", 90-pound tiny woman with barely any armor on whatsoever, and you smack into that concrete at 100+ miles an hour, you'll be fine.
Oh, right, because in a universe where Kate Bishop falls off a very tall building and survives, in a universe where Star-Lord gets sent into space and somehow survives that, and somehow in a universe where Black Widow manages to walk off everything in her own movie, Riri Williams falling out of the sky and surviving is clearly the most unrealistic thing ever. Also need to remind you, this is the same series where a giant alien raisin wiped out half of all existence. I don't think realism is really a thing to peg out here, Heel.
She walks past this concerned citizen who says, "Do you need a band-aid or an ice pack?" And she says, "No, I'm a 4'11" black girl. I'll be absolutely fine." What if we clothed ourselves in black women? We would become invincible.
I'm just gonna let that line speak for itself. It's very clear throughout most of this review, Heel is simply mad that the main character in this series is not someone that looks like him. Well, don't worry, Heel, there are plenty of other media you can check out that have characters that look just like you. You can check out the first Puss in Boots movie, Humpty Dumpty's in there. You can also watch the old Sonic SatAM cartoon and check out their version of Dr. Robotnik. You also got Captain Underpants, Elmer Fudd, Egg Foo, Shrek, Gru. Oh, and you also got the Kinder Egg mascot. Plenty of representation there for people that look like you, Heel. You know what? I'll throw in the Thumb Nums from Spy Kids for good measure. There you go. You got some good rep there.
What does your mama call you, says this little boy. I can only imagine the answer would be fatherless from Riri. I mean, if it was, that would be correct, because we're hitting every stereotype on the fucking board in this show.
Huh, funny you tried to accuse the show writers of being racist when just a minute ago you were trying to claim that every black person in media that's written by a black person is written as a criminal, when that's really not the case at all. He really seems to hone in specifically on the fact that Riri Williams is a young black woman and that's the thing that's gonna kill this show, when really that's not the case at all. A lot of people already didn't like Riri even before this show came out because of the comics she starred in and the way she was written in those. A lot of people found Riri being basically a young savant not that relatable at all. It wasn't the fact that she was black in the least, and the thing is, they've actually already made a young black character that is received very well, that being Miles Morales. Miles is an incredibly beloved character, and that's because he's written very well. A lot of people really relate to the struggles that Miles goes through in his stories, and that's because he's written to be a much more grounded character than Riri. So really, the fact that Riri is a black woman is not the thing that makes the comics or this show mediocre. Just like anything else, it is 100% the writing behind this character, because Marvel has totally made good black characters before, Miles Morales being a great example. You can't just look at a show, see a black character, and call that woke propaganda. That's not real criticism. You have to look at the things that make up that character and how they're written and how the quality of the story is overall. How well are the characters fleshed out? How well does the story pace itself? Things like that are really the things that will make or break a show, not the fact that it might have a black character at the center. Overall, anti-woke television criticism really isn't criticism whatsoever. Rather than looking at all the things you should look for when criticizing a TV show like I just described here, they'd rather get mad that there's a female version of Loki in the latest Loki show, or that Iron Man has supposedly been replaced by a black woman. It's incredibly superficial and honestly lacks a lot of media literacy overall. It's channels like these that discourage media literacy in favor of bashing a minority. But while all these channels are very clearly not real critics, there are some critics that criticize television shows that actually do a good job in my opinion. So I want to recommend some for you to check out instead of the anti-woke grifters. First up, Billiam. Billiam is a reviewer who often tackles a lot of older, classic, even sometimes just straight up obscure TV shows that don't always get talked about. His videos go very in depth on a lot of different kinds of shows, so they end up being very long, like he did like a 6-hour video on Lost. So if longer videos especially are very much more your speed, definitely go check him out. Billiam is great. Another one I really recommend is actually Jordan Fringe, especially for animated series content. Jordan talks about a lot of different kinds of TV shows, specifically with cartoons more so. He's looked at all the Scooby-Doo shows, all the Sonic cartoons, all the Tom and Jerry cartoons, pretty much everything. So if that's your jam, definitely go check him out. Very much worth your time. Another one I really recommend for cartoon-based stuff is The Roundtable. They cover a huge variety of cartoons and especially are great for news on current cartoons. They've done a lot of videos covering South Park, Family Guy, Steven Universe, Gumball, and are also going to probably talk about the upcoming Gumball reboot, which I will too, so look forward to videos on that from me as well. The last one I want to recommend is Brain Pilot, who does a lot of live action TV pretty much only, but also does occasionally talk about a few animated shows. I honestly think this guy is kind of underrated since I don't see him talked about much in the TV criticism scene. He does offer a lot of fair criticism on a wide variety of TV shows though, so I very much recommend him as well. Overall, anti-woke criticism for television just really isn't real criticism. And while it does seem like there's a never-ending slop farm of this kind of content pushed out, I do hope that eventually real critics will take the forefront once more. But what do you think? Am I wrong? Are channels like Nerdrotic, Heel, and others offering real criticism? Let me know down in the comments below. Regardless, thank you so much for making it to the end of this video, and I hope you enjoyed it or learned something new from it. If you did like this video, be sure to give it a like and consider subscribing as well. I do a lot of content like this overall, often analyzing movies and TV shows, so if you like this video, you'll probably like the other videos I have planned for the future as well. If there's a topic you think I should really cover here on YouTube, consider joining my Discord, which is linked down below. We have a questions and suggestions channel where you can put an idea for me to cover here on YouTube in the future. You can also check out my letterbox, which is also linked down below, to see the movies and shows that I've seen before and often ones that I haven't fully reviewed here on YouTube. Special thanks to my patrons DGC1996 and Trayvon Gibson for supporting me over there as well. And also thanks to Jared the Rabbit, Balf Games, David Deister, and you the Guardian for supporting me as YouTube members. I really appreciate you all a ton, and I appreciate you for coming to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it or took something new away from it. But for now, I've been Otterly Noah, and I'll see you on the other side. Bye!